نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we continue from where we left off last week in the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this last session and this session and probably a part of next session and maybe the one after, we'll be telling the story of the Battle of Badr, of Ghazwat Badr. And as I tried to point out the last 2 or 3 times, that although this part of his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, a lot of it is going to be telling the stories of battles. The battles did not take, if you look at in terms of time percentage, they were not the majority of his life or the life of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in. I mean, altogether, it was just a couple of months that maybe, if you put Badr and Uhud and Al-Khandaq and Mu'tah and Tabuk and Hunayn and all, put them all together, they don't add up to a few months. When he was living there, he lived in Medina obviously for 10 years, alayhi salatu wasalam. Now the reason that they take a bigger chunk for us here is because people tend to remember difficult situations. People tend to recall hardships well. And the Quran was revealed after these battles or during the battles to comment on people's behaviors. There's a lot of time in life where things just kind of flow. Things just, you're flowing along. There's not much to remember about these days. Just regular days. You wake up, have food, go work, come back, family, pray, go to sleep, repeat. You do that a couple of times. These days don't tend to be remembered that much. It's the days in life where you have to sacrifice something, or where your values are in question, or where you are being tested and trialed. Those are the days that you remember. And sometimes, nothing can happen for decades, and then a week comes by, and years and years of work can be shoved into one day or a couple of days. And that's why when you read the Quran does not document every single day of his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. No, it documents specific times where important things happened, where there were tests and trials, and those are where the lessons are learned. So I don't have a perfect record of every single day from the day he went to Medina until he passed away, alayhi salatu wasalam. And there will be gaps in terms of knowing what happened in this period. I'll give you between year 2 and 3 what was going on, between 3 and 4 what was going on. But it'll be generic, and we'll just take the verses in the Quran that gave some teachings regarding what was happening. But yeah, there'll be a large chunk of the time where we're talking about the battles, even though the battles are not long, but they were important. Right? There were moments where people had to prove themselves, where people had to stand their ground, where it was scary, where it was hard to do so. And the recollection of the Sahaba from those moments is strong. And the recollection and the revelation of the Quran regarding those moments is also very clear, which is why we take some time and talk about them. And telling their stories are filled with lessons and moments of beauty and moments of integrity and moments of strength and courage and bravery, things that as Muslims we identify with and we should take with us as a part of our identity, because this is what these are our ancestors, these are our forefathers, this is what they did, this is why we're Muslim today, this is what we have to aspire to. They were the role models and they set the bar for us, and that's why we'll study these stories. So last time I talked about what happened in terms of the caravan that Abu Sufyan went to Damascus with, and within that caravan he had taken all of the stolen wealth that the Sahaba had left behind, and what the Prophet ﷺ personally left behind. And the Prophet ﷺ kept tabs on this caravan all along. From before he even left Mecca, he knew that they were preparing for it. And he kept an eye on it. And when he got to Damascus, he knew it was there. And when it was on its way back, he also knew it was on its way back. And that's when he presented the idea to the Sahaba that we should go after it. And I went over last week how the Sahaba, many of them were not a big fan of this plan. They didn't want to go after the caravan because things were going well in Medina. It had been 2 years and things were going really well. It was Ramadan and they were enjoying a very beautiful degree of spirituality. They were on a mental, psychological high, all of them. They're living in Medina, they're with the Prophet ﷺ. They were finally respected and they had their freedom and the country was actually well maintained and things were thriving, they were getting better. Those who were not doing as well at the beginning were now doing much better. And they didn't want to poke the bear. Why poke Quraysh and why instigate something? For money? Ya Rasulullah, all you've been teaching us is that wealth of dunya is not that important, not to get caught up on those things. But then the ayat focused on the fact that it's not about the money. It's about haqq, it's about rights, It's about the fact that someone took away your right from you. They did that with force. You have been treated with injustice, and you have to continue to fight back until you find justice again. And then if you don't want the money, you want to gift it, gift it. If if you don't need the money, you don't care for it, you want to gift it back to the person, gift it back. But take it back first. Take back what is yours. And this idea within Islam is, this is a concept in Islam that is not negotiable. And this is not based on, I'm not talking about day-to-day interactions. I'm not talking about you having a disagreement with a family member or someone at work saying something that you didn't agree. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual dhulm, where a forest or an army removed you from your land, took away your possessions, where you have been treated in a way where your basic human rights have been violated. When that occurs, then no, there is no bravery in forgiving. You forgive after you go back and you fight for what is yours, and you stand your ground. And then, if you want to forgive, you can forgive. Al-afu 'inda al-maqdira, the Arabs. Your afu, when you pardon people, is when you have the ability, when you are in strength, in a moment of strength, not when you're weak. Forgiveness when you're weak is just an act of cowardice. It's just it's a way to get out of actually having to stand up against the zalim, to stand up against oppression. So these verses in the Quran came and documented that no, it's not an option for you not to go after this. You have to. This is not about your money. Who said anything about your money? I don't care about your money. It's كما أخرجك ربك من بيتك بالحق يجادلونك في الحق بعدما تبين كأنما يساقون إلى الموت وهم ينظرون. So they went after the caravan. Abu Sufyan is not naive. Abu Sufyan knew that the Prophet ﷺ had his eye on this caravan. He knew very well that this was not just any caravan, that this was something, this was stolen wealth. So he knew that at some point, something was going to be instigated. So that's why he left with an abnormally armed caravan. Like he had way more people armed, had way more cavalry with him on this caravan than any other that he ever left with. And his threshold to changing his route was very, very low. And he had his eyes all around waiting. And once the Prophet ﷺ moved that morning, right, it was the 17th of Ramadan that this all happened. When he moved ﷺ with the 313 people that were gathered for that morning, ﷺ, Abu Sufyan knew. Before he made it to where he was, Abu Sufyan had already taken an alternate route down the shoreline. And he sent Amr ibn Damdam down into Mecca to call al-Latima, al-Ghawth wal-Latima, smacking his face and making a scene to get the people of Quraysh to listen to him. And Abu Jahl would swear that he was going to go to the area that the Prophet ﷺ went to try and get the caravan, and he would stay there for a week, and he would perform dhabih, and he would eat, and he would dance for his asnam to show the Arab that no one messes with them. And he got a bit arrogant and got ahead of himself. Even though Atika had that vision that she had. She saw a vision where a man would come in the dream 3 nights in a row and stand on Jabal al-Safa, and he would say, "Ala ghadr maw'idukum ba'da thalath." Oh, those who have betrayed, your days in 3 more days for you. And Abu Jahl would get more agitated with that than anything. He would come and he would say, ya Bani Abdul Muttalib, tanabba'at nisa'ukum. Now your ladies are also prophets. It's not enough that you have a man prophet, now you also have a woman prophet. She has visions. Wallahi la in lam yahduth shay' ba'da thalath لنكتبن وصحيفة على أن بني هاشم أكذب العرب ونعلقها في الكعبة. If nothing happens, we're going to write on a piece of document and write on it, we're going to get a document right, that Banu Hashim are the biggest liars amongst the Arab. Right? And then put it in the Kaaba. And of course something happened. Umayyah bin Khalaf didn't want to go, but they kept on mocking him until he went, because he was told once by Bilal al-Habashi. Bilal told him, one day I'm going to take you out. And he told him, why are you saying this? He said, Rasulullah ﷺ told me this. He said, he told you that? قال نعم فخاف أمية. So when he was able to sell him to Abu Bakr, he sold him immediately. He wanted to get him away from himself. And then when this happened, he told him, no, I'm not going else. So they mocked him. So they mocked him to the point where he had no choice but to go with them. But as he was wearing his, getting dressed for the war, Umayyah would look at Abu Jahl and he said, Wallahi la anta tasuquni ila maqtali. You are taking me to my deathbed with what you're forcing me to do. Abu Lahab didn't go, but he died in Mecca anyways, and I talked about that last week. So what's happening on the other side? The Prophet ﷺ, on the other hand, he left with these 313 people. There's only 2 people on horseback. Al-Miqdad and Al-Zubayr, that's it. Now, horseback is a big deal. Cavalry makes in those wars was huge. It's like tanks. If you didn't have a lot of them, then you had a much weaker army. They had just built an army, so they weren't that well prepared, but they were as prepared as they would be. The rest were all on foot. The Prophet ﷺ made it to the area to where he was trying to catch the caravan, and he missed it. And the news of Quraysh leaving Mecca towards Medina, towards him, ﷺ, came across. So he gathered the Sahaba, and he said this very, very famous quote that you will find, I will repeat for you over the next couple of months 3 or 4 times. And whenever the decision was that of policy or that of a heavy impact on the well-being of people, he would gather, alayhi salatu wasalam, the Sahaba and say, Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas, O people, give me your consultation. Meaning, I'm consulting you, what do I do? Now, the question he's asking, why is he asking this, alayhi salatu wasalam? Why not? He's the leader, it's an army, he's the commander, he can just make an executive decision that we're going to go and meet them. We're going to go and prepare ourselves for war. We're going to fight. He could have made that decision, alayhi salatu wasalam. The problem was that his agreement with Al-Ansar was that he would be protected in Medina. Now, if you've been listening to my khutbahs over the last 6-7 weeks, we've been talking about Bay'at al-Aqaba, right? The pledge of Aqaba. Now, he's referring to in his mind the pledge of Aqaba. That pledge, when he asked them for 5 things, the 5th was for him to be protected and the Muslims to be protected. The agreement was in Yathrib. They never talked about leaving the city. There was never an agreement to go to fight outside the city. So technically, this is not a part of the initial agreement. So alayhi salatu wasalam had to, he had to be honest. We didn't agree to this, so I have to ask what people think. Ashiru alayhi, what do you think we do? Because what he wanted to do, alayhi salatu wasalam, he made it clear, is that he wants to go and meet Quraysh. Not in Yathrib, but meet them somewhere outside, in the area that is today is known as Badr, which is why the battle was called that. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would stand up and he would say something nice. Imdi bina ya Rasulullah, go with us and we will walk behind you, etc., etc. So Abu Bakr, of course, he's going to say that. فَتَبَسَّمَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. His face was lit up and he was smiling. He sat down, Abu Bakr, after he spoke. Now, in any gathering for Arab, that would be enough. If I asked for consultation, and then one person stood up and they said something, and no one objected, then that was how we voted. That was a vote. That was consensus. There's consensus that this is what we're going to do, because one person stood up and no one stood up and argued back or gave an objection. Abu Bakr stood, he said those words, he sat down, no one said a word. Everyone's fine. He repeated alayhi salatu wasalam, Ashiru alayya ayyuhan nas, O people, grant me your consultation. So Al-Miqdad al-Aswad would stand up radiallahu anhu. Miqdad, beautiful gentleman, a fun sahabi to talk about. He would stand up radiallahu anhu and he would say, Ya Rasulullah, imdi bina, فإنا لا نقول لك ما قالته بنو إسرائيل لموسى اذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا هنا قاعدون ولكننا نقول اذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا معكم مقاتلون. So go and walk with us. We don't say to you what Banu Israel said to Musa. Go, you and your Lord fight, and we will stay back and watch. No, we tell you, go with your Lord, and we come with you. فَكَبَّرَ النَّاسَ Allahu Akbar. They were happy. He sat down. No one objected. He repeated, أَشِيرُ عَلَيَّ أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ. So people started looking around. قَالَ فَقَامَ سَعْدُ بْنُ مُعَاذ. We're going to talk about Sa'd, inshallah, radiallahu anhu. Sa'd, 25, 26, something like that. Young man. Sayyidu qawmihi, radiallahu anhu, the leader of Al-Aws, Banu Abd al-Ashhal. So he'd stand up and he would say, كَأَنَّكَ تُرِيدُنَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. It seems like you want us to speak. Al-Ansar, right? It seems like you want us to speak. فَقَالَ نَعَمْ عليه الصلاة والسلام. Yes, I want you to speak. Because the Muhajirin, khalas, they're with me. Wherever I go, they're going to go. They don't have much of a choice here. But you do. The Ansar, no, I didn't agree with you on this one. Like, this is not a part of our initial agreement. So yes, I need to hear from you. فَقَامَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ وَأَرْضَاهُ. And this is what he said. I put it up there because it's honestly just a beautiful, beautiful thing to read. And I take much pleasure in reading it to you and explaining it, because you're going to see at the end when Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu is martyred and dies as a shaheed, I'll remind you of these things. I'll remind you of 1 or 2 or 3 moments in his life. I don't have a lot about Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Well, how many hadith did Sa'd ibn Mu'adh narrate? Right? How many stories do we have about Sa'd ibn Mu'adh in Seerah? 3 or 4. 3 or 4 tops. That's it. That's it. Like, I don't have a lot of stories about the man. Right? Yet, you're going to see when he dies, يَهْتَزُّ لِمَوْتِهِ عَرْشُ الرَّحْمَنِ. The throne of the Almighty will shake in joy when he dies. رضي الله عنه وأرضاه. And the Prophet ﷺ would continue to talk about him until he died. ﷺ. Like, he would continue to remember him and speak of him, even though I only have, because it doesn't matter how long you live. It doesn't matter how much time you spend. It's what you do with the time that you got. It's sometimes just moments where you do something that's meaningful, moments where you are needed and you come in and you make the difference. And that's what Sa'd was like. Sa'd was that type of person. He didn't talk a lot. He wasn't always upfront. But at certain crucial moments, Sa'd stood up and made the difference. Sa'd delivered. Remember when Mus'ab ibn Umayr came and was struggling in Medina, Sa'd seized the moment and brought all of an Aus to Islam, bringing like a couple of hundred people all at once, causing Al-Khazraj to get jealous and causing a whole influx of people from Khazraj accepting Islam because of that rivalry that they had. So he brought technically 700 people to Islam within a day or two. And then this moment. Because the Prophet, because Badr would not have happened. I want you to understand what I mean by this. Had Sa'd not stood up and said these things, Badr would have not happened. The Prophet ﷺ would have went back to Medina. He would have went back to Yathrib. We'll go back. The Ansar didn't give him the okay. They're not saying anything. He's not going to risk breaking the agreement or going outside of the parameters of the pledge that he took from them. He would have went back to Medina, and they would have been Badr. And the Mushrikeen would have went to the area of Badr, and they would have had their parties, and they would have strengthened themselves and looked all flashy and flashy in front of the Arab, and went back to Mecca, taking the morale of the Muslims down even lower. But Sa'd stood up and he said the following. قال يا رسول الله قد آمنا بك فصدقناك وشهدنا أن ما جئت به هو الحق. Indeed, O Prophet of Allah, O Messenger of Allah, we have believed you and we follow you and we testify that what you have brought is the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأعطيناك على ذلك عهودنا ومواثيقنا على السمع والطاعة. We have given you our pledges. He's referring to Bayat al-Aqaba as well. That's why I gave this khutbah. It's a big deal for them. We gave you our pledges. We gave you our word. على السمع والطاعة, that we will listen to you. We will adhere. نقول سمعنا وأطعنا. You tell us what to do and we will say yes. We already gave our word on this. But isn't it interesting how not just polite he is, alayhi salatu wasalam, but how accurate he is. No, I didn't agree to you on this specifically, so I'm not going to make a decision from myself. I need you to be on board. This is the type of leadership he brought, alayhi salatu wasalam. He was no dictator. He understood people, he valued people. It's because he actually, yes, the Ansar probably would have went with him had he not asked the question. Actually, I know they would have. But what do you not think that because he did this, they felt more valued? Right? Correct or not? Yeah. Did they not feel more valued? Did they not feel that this man actually cares? He listens to us. He has interest in what we have to say. Yes, because there is a small caveat in the agreement, in the pledge, that we weren't supposed to be outside of Medina. They may not say anything, but if he ignores it, alayhi salatu wasalam, even the best of us will still feel it. You can be a very good person who wants to do khair, but if people around you fail to recognize or acknowledge or treat you well, you'll notice it. You'll notice it. You may not stop doing the good, you'll continue to do the good, but you will notice it. You're human, of course you're going to notice it. And you'll register it somewhere. That they don't care that much, that I'm not that valued, that my opinion doesn't matter that much. And you'll hold on to it. Then it'll happen again. And you'll continue to do the khair. You won't stop. You'll continue to do the khair. But now you'll put in that registry a second one, a second incident. And you'll continue. And then again, someone will fail to care about what you had to say. You'll continue to work, no problem, big smile doing it. But you'll put number 3. And then after that, number 4, and then number 5, and then you have a big bag, and it's heavy, and it's on your back, and you're carrying it around, and after a while, you're not smiling anymore, and you don't want to work anymore, and then you move away, and you stop volunteering, and I wouldn't blame the person who goes through that. Even though as a Muslim, if you come to me and I talk to you with my tazkiyah hat on to teach you, I say, no, learn to bag that and throw it away, it's rubbish. But I wouldn't blame someone who is continuously being ignored if they decide at some point that maybe they're not that enthusiastic to help you out anymore. It's a problem in most Muslim institutions, most Muslim countries, and most Muslim movements, is that we don't value people. We don't listen to them. We don't care what they have to say. And when they say what they want and when they actually express themselves and they're going out on a limb by doing it because it's scary to speak and go against the flow, we belittle it or we ignore it or maybe we even chastise them for it so they never speak again. And then we wonder why it's not all working, why we're not chumming, why we're not actually jamming, why we're not working well together, why things aren't moving forward, why the community is not enthusiastic to do stuff, because they don't feel. The Prophet ﷺ knew that he could say, we're going to fight the mushrikeen, and all of them would say, Allahu Akbar. He could technically go by what Abu Bakr al-Miqdad said, and he wouldn't be wrong. But he knows how people function, alayhi salatu wasalam. No, I need to hear from you. You have to say that you're going, so that you know that I care. It's not because, and so that Sa'ad could say this. And the Ansar can feel something about themselves. Subhanallah. Alayhi salatu wasalam, a master of people management, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then he said, لَعَلَّكَ تَخْشَى أَن تَكُونَ الْأَنصَارُ تَرَى لِنَفْسِهَا حَقًّا أَلَّا تَنصُرَكَ إِلَّا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ. Maybe you're scared or you're worried that the Ansar feel that they should only stand by you in their homes. See, Sa'ad's a smart guy. He's not, you see, he knew. People act like, no, we're fine. No, you're not. You noticed. You noticed that I didn't pay attention to what you did. You noticed that I neglected and ignored and forgot to say something to you. You noticed. Of course you will. You're human. You have the right to. Sa'ad noticed that this is not what we agreed upon. We'll go with you, but we didn't agree upon this. Had the Prophet ﷺ not asked this question, I know that would have added up in their hearts. It would have added up in their hearts. But he asked them, he knew what to do, alayhi sallam. So let the person say it. Let the person bring it forward and say, here's what my concern is. Good, say it. So we can figure out whether we're going to, because now the Ansar, they move with him on their own accord. They go with him, but it's their choice. They're not being forced to do something they didn't agree to. Understand the difference? The difference between I'm saying, yep, I know it's not our agreement, but I want to do it with you. Versus, we didn't agree to this, but I love you, so I'm going to go, but you didn't really ask me my opinion here. And that's going to leave a little bit of a bitter taste and kind of a thought. No, we're going to let you speak first. وَإِنِّي أَقُولُ عَنِ الْأَنصَارِ. And I speak on behalf of all of the Ansar that are with us today. وَأُجِيبُ عَنْهُمْ. And I respond to you on their behalf. فَاضْعَنْ حَيْثُ شِئْتَ وَصِلْ حِبَالَ مَنْ شِئْتَ وَاقْطَعْ حِبَالَ مِنْ شِئْتَ وَخُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِنَا مَا شِئْتَ وَاتْرُكْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِنَا مَا شِئْتَ وَيَكُونُ الَّذِي أَخَذْتَهُ مِنْ أَمْوَالِنَا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْنَا مِنَ الَّذِي تَرَكْتَهُ. He said, go wherever you want and make treaties with whomever you want and break treaties with whomever you want. And here's our money. Take from it what you want, leave from it what you want, and that which you take from us is more beloved to us than that which you leave us. رضي الله عنه وأرضاه. وما أمرت به من أمر أو ما أمرت به من أمر فأمرنا تابع لأمرك. Whatever command you give us, then our ruling or our opinion is your opinion. Whatever command you give, that's what we want. That is what we accept. That's our opinion. Our opinion is whatever your opinion is. صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين. نعم. لئن سرت حتى تبلغ برك الغمدان لنسيرن معك. Walk, and then he gave us a place that's very far away. It's like saying Timbuktu or something. If you walk to the end of the earth, we will walk with you. وَوَاللَّهِ لَنِ اسْتَعْرَضْتَ بِنَا هَذَا الْبَحْرَ فَخُطَّهُ لَخُضْنَاهُ مَعَكَ مَا تَخَلَّفَ مِنَّا رَجُلٌ وَاحِدٌ. And if you decide to walk into the sea, then we will walk behind you into the ocean. Not one of us will stay behind. وما نكره أن تلقى بنا عدوا وإنا لصبر في الحرب صدق في اللقاء وإني أرجو أن يريك الله منا ما تقر به عينك. Allahu Akbar. He said, and we do not fear seeing an enemy with you. And you will see that we are perseverant during war and that we are honest and truth during combat. And I ask Allah to show you from us something that will be the cool of your eye. I'm hoping that you will see from us something that will make you happy. صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين. فكبر الناس قال وتهلل وجه رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. His face started to glow عليه الصلاة والسلام in happiness. And this is Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. You don't have to say a lot in life, but sometimes, right moment, yeah, he just plugged in, right moment. And he got the ajr of this. He is the one. I tell people, you don't understand. Badr happened because Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was there. People, when I say that, people look at me, what are you talking about? You don't know the story. Had he not stood up that day and said this, I know the Prophet would have not left. Because alayhi salatu wasalam is too wise to take people to do something they didn't agree to. He's too wise. So he needed someone. So someone had to speak up, and Sa'ad did. And because of Sayyidina Sa'ad, we have this story. And the Prophet ﷺ was happy with these beautiful words. And they moved. Did I put down somewhere? Maybe I didn't. So it would take them around 200 kilometers to go to where they were going to meet the mushrikeen. And to get there, they would have to use camels. For every 3 people, there was going to be 1 camel. For every 3, 1 camel. So 100, if you're going, so it's 150 kilos, right? 150 kilos. So how much, if there's 3 of us, there's 1 camel, and there's 150 kilometers. How much are you going to ride? Yeah, you'll ride 50 and you'll walk 100, right? So it was the Prophet ﷺ and Ali ibn Abi Talib and Marthad ibn Abi Marthad. So Ali and Marthad are both 25, 26, 27. They're very young, they're very strong. Marthad is like a door of a man. He doesn't care at all. He said, Ya Rasulullah, irkab. You ride, make it out, we're fine. فقال لا فما أنتما فما أنا بأغنى عن الأجر منكما. I don't need the ajr less than you do. I don't need the ajr less than you, nor do you need it more than me. So alayhi salatu rode 50, walked 100. He forced them, even though both of them were like, no, Ya Rasulullah, aib. I can't be riding and you're walking. But he refused, alayhi salatu wasalam. Why? You'll find this many times in his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. The reason being is that he wanted the ajr. He didn't want anyone to give him, make it easier, so he wouldn't get the, no, I'm going to be like everyone else, so I get the full ajr, like you. His eyes, his sight, alayhi salatu wasalam, was on akhirah. What he was going to get for the amount of effort that he was putting in, alayhi salatu wasalam. They would go and they would prepare themselves in the area of Badr, because now we don't understand the landscape of that region very well because we don't live there. But back then, if you were going to fight an army, you needed the proper place to do it, or else it's impossible for you and for them. Like it turns into a bloodbath and it's a mess, and there's no way to strategize. So they had to figure out. So Badr was where he was going, alayhi salatu wasalam, because that is the area where if a battle is going to occur, that's the right place for it to occur. And Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan knew that anyways. So that's why they were headed to begin with. It was going to take them like the better part of a day to get there. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had a very short period of time to prepare what was going to happen, knowing that Quraysh was going to outnumber his army by a lot. The difference was going to be, he didn't know what the difference was yet. But he knew that they were going to outnumber his army by a lot. So he'd go alayhi salatu wasalam, and he would start figuring out where they're going to be, like where they're going to take it. If you go to the Surah Al-Anfal, you find the ayah, إِذْ أَنْتُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الدُّنْيَا, right? وَهُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الْقُصْوَى وَالرَّكْبُ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ وَلَوْ تَوَاعَدْتُمْ لَاخْتَلَفْتُمْ فِي الْمِيعَادِ وَلَكِنْ لِيَقْضِيَ اللَّهُ أَمْرًا كَانَ مَفْعُولًا. So when we look at Badr, I think I have a picture of it here somewhere. Do I not? I remember putting something here. Yeah. So this is not going to be very helpful for you. Yeah. So this is like the best. The pictures online are not very nice. None of this is going to be helpful for you. That's fine. The Prophet ﷺ would come to a certain area where he had a little bit of an advantage in terms of the height, meaning a little bit higher land than the land in front of it. Al-Udwat al-Dunya. Dunya, as in the closer to Medina, the closer to Yathrib. Al-Quswa in the Quran means the farther away, meaning the farther away from Medina. So he came to Badr, and there's 2 spaces where you can camp. You can camp farther away from Medina or closer. So he chose the closer area, alayhi salatu wasalam, to actually camp. So when he was there, alayhi, so he starts to line people up. And a bunch of stories that I'm going to tell you that occurred within this period. So one of them, or one of my favorite, is Sawad ibn Ghaziya's story. So the Prophet ﷺ is strategizing, and they're planning out how the battle is going to occur. And the idea was that they put themselves between 2 hills. They put themselves between 2 hills. so that they could not be penetrated, they couldn't be flanked. The hill, it was too big for them to go around in Badr. So he wanted them to stand in a way where even if it's just one line, to close the space between the two hills, so that his army was filling the area. He had 313 people, making them into small groups and fill in that space, so that it forces Quraysh to match him within this area, so that they can't really capitalize on their numbers advantage. So he's lining them up, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is war. War is coming. This is a big deal. You can imagine that this is a very, very scary moment. I'm going to point out to you how scary this was for them from the Quran. But he's lining them up, alayhi salatu wasalam, and he's talking to them and he's giving speeches and he's strategizing. And there's this one guy who every time the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam walks by the line is standing outside of the line. Like he's not standing, like he's a bit ahead or a bit back. He was a big guy, with a big karshu. He's wearing the armor, but he has a big belly. His belly is kind of coming out from under the armor. And he's standing there, he's always in the wrong, like he's not standing right. So the Prophet ﷺ would come by and say, Istawi ya Sawad. Istawi meaning, as in Salah, Istawi. And he get stand in line. Why are you ahead of your brother? Stand in line. Once, first time, second time, third time. So every time he comes back, Sawad is standing a little bit to the wrong direction, or a little bit ahead, or a little behind. So the Prophet ﷺ, as he was speaking, he had a stick. He was drawing things on the ground. So he tapped Sawad on his belly. Stawi ya Sawad, like, get in line. This is like the fourth time. Get in line. This is war. So he taps him on the belly. فَقَالَ سَوَادْ أَوْجَعْتَنِي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. You have hurt me. You have caused me pain. Now the Sahaba are looking at him like, are you insane? What's wrong with you? This is war. What are you doing? فَقَالَ أَوْجَعْتَنِي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. You have caused me pain. فَأَعْطَاهُ صلى الله عليه وسلم, he gave him the stick. فَقَالَ اقتص أو اقتد. Take your right back. If I harmed you, take back what is yours. Hit me. فَقَالَ لَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّكَ إِنَّمَا ضَرَبْتَنِي دُونَ حِجَابٍ. No, it's not fair. See, you're wearing all this and your stomach is not out. You hit me on my flesh, on my belly. How is this fair? The Sahaba obviously are standing there, ready to kill this man. But they don't know what's happening. This is not fair. This is not the same. It's not equal. قال فرفع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن بطنه. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام would lift up his qamis, showing his belly. And the Sahaba are standing there looking and you see, قال فانكب سواد على بطن رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. So this man, he plunged himself and hugged the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, his stomach. And the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, ما تصنع? What are you doing? فقال يا رسول الله إنها لرائحة الشهادة. I can smell martyrism in the air. وأحببت أن يكون آخر عهدي بالدنيا أن يمس وجهي جلد بطنك يا رسول الله. What I wanted to the last thing I did in my life is for my skin to touch yours. I just wanted that to be the last thing I did. Is that I came into skin-on-skin contact with you, Ya Rasulullah. So when I go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's martyrism, and this was the last thing I did, is I kissed your belly. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. فسكت الناس وكان سواد من أوائل من استشهد. And amongst the earliest people who fell that day. Now, how many people died on the day of Badr? Anyone know? Huh? Anyone know how many Muslims were martyred on the day of Badr? Huh? 17? Yeah, around 14 is the number that most Seerah scholars are accepted. You're very close, for ahsan, very good. So it's around 14. Some books will give you 12, 13. Some will say a bit higher, but 14 is the number that most of them are happy with. And Sawad was one of them. So not a lot of people fell on the day of Badr. Very few Muslims actually passed, but one of them was Sayyidina Sawad radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ would perform a certain degree of intelligence himself. He would take Abu Bakr and they would go and do intelligence. After he gave them some of the instructions of what to do, he would go ﷺ and map out the area and scout and see what's happening. And they would find one of Abu Jahl or one of Quraysh's spies. He's a young kid. They would send sometimes these kids as water boys or acting like they do his job. So the Prophet ﷺ caught him. فقال ها من أين أتيت? Where do you come from? So he lies at the beginning. فقال لا بل أتيت من عندي فلان وفلان. You came from the army with these people. فاصدقنا. So be honest with us. فقال نعم. He got scared. Yes, I did. قال فكم القوم? How many of them are there? فقال لا أدري. I have no idea. He was not lying. He's a kid. He has no idea. فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He asked him a question. قال كم يذبحون? How many do they eat a day? Like how many do they slaughter? Forgive me, a day. فقال بين التسعة والعشرة. They slaughter between 9 to 10 camels daily. فقال القوم بين 900 والألف. The number is between 900 and 1,000, because every 100 people, one camel suffices. So the Prophet ﷺ made a little calculation, and it's between 900 and 1,000. And the Sahaba heard that. They heard the number 1,000. 1,000 people. 3 times their number. 3 times their number. 3 times. Traditional warfare, that made a big difference. If you're going in and they're 3 times your number, and that's not just the problem, that's not even the problem, Allah. It was actually the difference of preparation. It was the number of cavalry that they had versus the number that he had, alayhi sallam. The whole thing, it was a complete imbalance. It was a complete imbalance. You're walking in, you're outnumbered 3 to 1, and they're way more prepared than you can ever be. So the Sahaba would get a little bit scared. And I'm saying this now because the verses in the Quran are going to come and address this piece. That they get a little bit, they're already scared beforehand. They didn't want to leave, right? Most of them didn't want to leave to begin with. Now they're out, and they've agreed, and now they're finding out that, oh my God, there's 1,000 of them coming, which is a large army back then. So they're getting a little bit more scared. The Prophet ﷺ, they would run, by the way, they run into like a man, a Bedouin man. And the man would ask the Prophet ﷺ a question. He would say, "Min ayna al-qawm, min ayna al-rijal, where are you guys from?" So he would answer. It's interesting. There's an interesting story. فيقول عليه فأجاب عليه الصلاة والسلام قال من ماء. We are from water, right? من ماء. Now in Arabic tradition, if you say min ماء, then what you mean by that is ماء العراق, meaning you come from the oases of Iraq, right? But he didn't say that, alayhi. So he said min ماء. And Abu Bakr is standing there because he doesn't want to tell this man who he is, because he doesn't want to give Abu Jahl any more information. Like he wants to make sure that no one figures anything out. And the man walks away, and they had a nice little encounter, and they went. And Abu Bakr said, يا رسول الله من ماء. We're from suddenly. فقال نعم أليس كل مخلوق من ماء. Is not every creation created from water? فقال بلى يا رسول الله. Yes, صلى الله عليه وسلم. I didn't lie to them. I didn't lie. He didn't ask. He didn't confirm where exactly in Iraq are you from. He didn't confirm. I didn't offer the information. And this is within the art of war, something very accepted. But I always like this story because it shows the Prophet ﷺ's way of thinking about things. They got very scared, the Sahaba. No one had fought Quraysh in a battle for decades and decades at that point. It's been decades. It's been at least 4 or 5 decades, no wars. In the last 4 times Quraysh had been in an encounter of combat, they had won. Quraysh had not been defeated in a very long time. In addition to that, Quraysh was the spiritual and political leader of the region. They had alliances with absolutely everyone. So for the Sahaba, this was an absolutely terrifying moment. They got very scared. So the verses in the Quran that talk about this time, إِذْ يُغَشِّيكُمُ النُّعَاسَ أَمَنَةً مِّنْهُ وَيُنَزِّلُ عَلَيْكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً لِيُطَهِّرَكُم بِهِ وَيُذْهِبَ عَنكُم رِجْزَ الشَّيْطَانِ وَلِيَرْبِطَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَيُثَبِّتَ بِهِ الْأَقْدَامِ. The Prophet ﷺ had people who would stand guard when it was time to rest. And what the story goes is that the people who were standing on guard, يقول one of the guards, يقول سقط السيف مني 7 مرات يومها. I'm carrying my sword and it fell from me 7 times because he would fall asleep. And he's not to blame because the ayah in the Quran, يغشيكم النعاس. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent upon you this nu'as. Nu'as is when you get sleepy. أَمَنَةً مِّنْهُ, to grant you a certain degree of security and safety. It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them a 15-20 minute power nap. They fell asleep for a few moments and they woke up feeling refreshed, feeling much more, when you are filled with difficult emotions, right? And you end up being able to sleep for a while, you wake up, you feel a little bit better. This is known psychologically. It's very hard to sleep when you're struggling with emotions. It's hard, but if you're able to do it, it grants you, when you wake up, you feel a little bit better. It's like sleep presses the reset button sometimes. It's a superficial reset button, allows you to kind of go back and start over again. Instead of struggling with maybe an ongoing degree of anxiety and depression and fear and upset and rage, you sleep, you wake up, you feel a little bit better. So the Sahaba at that point, they were in a position where they were very scared. And they were very worried. And there was a lot of anxiety because they don't know how this was going to play out. They had no idea. So they all fell asleep for like 15 minutes. يُغَشِّيكُمُ النُّعَاسَ أَمَنَةً مِّنْهُ. It came from Allah as a gift of safety and security. وَيُنَزِّلُ عَلَيْكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً لِيُطَهِّرَكُم بِهِ. And then it rained softly upon you, granting you that purity, granting you a little bit of ease. It was a nice rain. The earth smelled nice. They were able to fill out their bottles. They were able to drink water. More happened, obviously, but this was for them in terms of their mental well-being. وَيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ رِجِزَ الشَّيْطَانِ. And then he removed from you all of the waswasa from shaitan, as he was telling you. Oh, what did he do? What is Muhammad doing to you? Do you understand what you're up for? Are you ready to die today? You didn't even say goodbye to your kids. Do you have your wasiyah written? Were you ready for this when you left, that you weren't going to go back home? Who's going to take care of your wife and children? All of these things are coming to their minds as they stand there with him, alayhi salatu wasalam. They're human. Brothers and sisters, they're human. They were human beings. Sahaba were not angels. They were human. They felt these things. The difference is that despite all of that, they still stood their ground. That's the difference. The difference is even though that was going on in their minds and hearts, even though this was absolutely impossible to imagine anyone doing, they still did it because they knew it was the right thing to do. In life, that's what you have to figure out. You have to be able to assess something logically and rationally. If it makes sense, you know it's the right thing to do, you do it. And yes, there will be a roller coaster of emotions that you feel as you do it, but that should not sway you from doing it when you know it's the right thing. Standing up against all of that, standing up against those emotions and those feelings and the waswasa of shaitan and the whims and desires of the nafs is what it means to be a good Muslim. That's what it means to be a good Muslim. Everyone can do the right thing when it's easy to do it. There's nothing impressive about that. You want to hear a story about that? You don't want to hear a story about that. You don't want to come here for me to tell you a story about someone who did something nice when it was really easy for them to do the thing that was nice. Like, yeah, fine, I could do that too. Move on, give me something interesting. Give me something to aspire to. Give me a story that I can think about. And that's what Badr is. That's how Badr is described in the Quran. يَوْمَ الْفُرْقَانِ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ. The day where there was a differentiation between haqq and batil, where the people of haqq stood their ground, and the people of batil, they declared themselves. يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ, when the two groups finally met face to face, haqq and batil. This is very rare. Haqq and haqq never meet, but batil and batil always meet in wars. Batil is always fighting itself. It's rare where haqq and batil actually face off. It doesn't happen that purely. There's always a little bit of a mix of both, and both sides. It's hard to figure out exactly who's right and who's wrong. And then all the old men sit in front of the TV and scream at each other for 5 hours, and trying to debating who was right. Well, who knows? But that day there was no debate. That day it was clear who was haqq and who was batil. It was pure as the sun. It was clear as the sky. But it was scary. Yeah, it was scary. وَلِيَرْبِطَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And all this happened so that he would strengthen your hearts. وَيُثَبِّتَ بِهِ الْأَقْدَامِ. And he would strengthen your feet on the ground, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. It would rain upon the area the Prophet ﷺ was in, and the area that the mushrikeen would arrive at. The difference is the area that he was in ﷺ was all rock. So when it rained, the rock became actually more stable, and it was easier to move upon. The area that the mushrikeen camped in, it was all soil. It rained, it became muddy. So now their boots were filled with mud. They weren't moving as easily. The Quran says that in the verse, إِذْ أَنْتُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الْقُصْوَى. You're in the area that's a little bit closer to Medina. They're in the area a little bit farther away. وَالرَّكْبُ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ. The caravan is now beyond you. It's beneath you, I mean it's over on the shore. It's out of your reach. You can't get there anymore. وَلَوْ تَوَاعَدْتُمْ. And if you tried to make this happen this way, لَاخْتَلَفْتُمْ فِي الْمِيعَادِ. Meaning if you tried to play it out where you would be in the right place and they would be in the right place, you would have لَاخْتَلَفْتُمْ. You would have failed to do it. وَلَكِنْ لِيَقْضِيَ اللَّهُ أَمْرًا كَانَ مَفْعُولًا. But this is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You didn't know that this area would be better than that one. You didn't know that it was going to rain and cause this. You didn't know any of that. You had no way to know that. And if you tried to plan this, you would have failed. But this is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, once he camped in that area, the space that his camp was going to be in, and they had prepared themselves, a man by the name of Al-Hubab ibn al-Mundhir would come to the Prophet ﷺ and would say, Ya Rasulullah, this is just a random Sahabi. Forgive me when I say random, I don't mean it to belittle. I just say he's not very famous. He barely has another story in all of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, maybe another one. That's it. And he didn't speak up very much. He wasn't very famous. But he was a person he was a strategist. And he was looking at where they camped within the area that they had. And he didn't like it. He's like, I don't think this is the right area. Like, they're going to stay in the same space. It's just there's something that it's off for him. So he came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, أَهَذَا مَنْزِلٌ أَنْزَلَكَهُ اللَّهُ. Is this a place that Allah told you to camp here? فَقَالَ لَا. قال أهو منزل تحبه فنبقى فيه من أجلك. Is this a space that you like, so we'll stay here because you like it? فقال لا. قال أهو الحرب والرأي والمكيدة. Is this the space that you chose because you're strategizing for war and for combat? فقال نعم هو الحرب والرأي والمكيدة. فقال هذا ليس بمنزل يا رسول الله. This is a bad spot. This is a random soldier in an army coming up to the grand commander, telling him, did you choose this space? If it's divine, I won't say a word. But did you choose it? Is it just yours? Yeah, it's me. It's wrong. This is a horrible space to stop. The reason he said that is because alayhi salatu wasalam had built the habit for them to say stuff like that. They didn't feel that they couldn't do it. They didn't feel that was weird, that I can't come, I don't want to come and say something to alayhi salatu wasalam. I don't want to come and object or maybe change things. No. He had established alayhi salatu wasalam such an open relationship, a degree of trust, a degree of love, and a degree of advice offering, of tawasi bil haqq wal sabr, where this person didn't feel awkward at all to come up to him alayhi salatu in the middle of the war and say, this is not the right place, you're wrong, you chose wrong. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم فما ترى يا حباب, what do you think? فقال يا رسول الله أما هنا فإننا لا نحسن أن نرى. From here, I don't like our vision. Like, I don't like how much we're seeing. فَتَقَدَّمْ بِنَا. Move forward a little bit. Move forward a little bit, like to the end of where the hills are, not in the middle of the hills. Go to the end. وَاجْعَلِ الْآبَارَ مِنْ خَلْفِنَا. There are a bunch of wells up front. Put them behind us. وَاطْمُرْهَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Cover all the wells. وَاتْرُكْ وَاحِدَةً نَشْرَبُ مِنْهَا فَنَشْرَبُ وَلَا يَشْرَبُونَ. And keep one well that is visible. We drink, they don't drink. Now, his idea is that we get an advantage for ourselves and put them at yet another disadvantage. We're put the wells behind us so they don't have access to the water. We cover them all up so they don't know where they are. We leave just one that's apparent, enough for us to drink from. And now we're a little bit up front so we can see better. فَقَالَ نِعْمَ الرَّأْيِ. Good, very nice, excellent. And he moved the whole army alayhi salatu wasalam based on this person's advice. It's at that moment where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would begin giving the ahadith about jihad. He would start talking alayhi salatu. All the ahadith that you find about jihad, when you read his ahadith alayhi salatu, know that there is context to these ahadith. Things were happening. If you read the ahadith that talk about jihad fi sabilillah, and the beauty of Jannat al-Na'im, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made ready, available to his servants who are going to fight for him, he said these alayhi salatu before battles. It was before battles that he said these things. So he started alayhi salatu wasalam to talk about jihad and talk about ajr al-shahada and talk about those who go and do qital fi sabilillah, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers them, because that was the moment for them. That was the moment for them. That's what they needed to be told. When else were you going to tell them? You're going to come to a bunch of students and tell them a hadith al-qital. They're trying to write exams. I'm going to come and tell them, no, al-qital fi sabilillah, and then have them lose their minds and go do something. No, because everything has context to it. There'll be a moment that you ask Allah that there will never be a moment where you need them. But when you do need them, you will find them, and they will grant you a lot of comfort. They will bring you much comfort because of what he said alayhi salatu wasalam. And I'm going to end with this because we have to go. I'll just say this. In the midst of all of this, as he was communicating with the Sahaba, strategizing, planning, he would take a moment every little while and take a moment and go stand a bit farther away from them towards the Qibla and make dua alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma wa'adaka alladhi nasraka alladhi wa'ad. Allahumma anjizni ma wa'adtani. Oh Allah, the victory that you have promised me. Oh Allah, grant me that which you have promised me. Ya Rabb, in tahlik hadhihi al-isaba la tu'bad fil ard. If these people die, then we will never bring tawheed to earth again. And he would make dua, يقول Abu Bakr, فما زال يدعو حتى سقطت بردته عن كتفيه. نرى بياض إبطيه. He's putting his hands up, Ya Allah, until this fell off his, his burda would fall off his shoulders. And you could see his arms out. He's like, Ya Allah, intahlik, Ya Allah, nasrak. And Abu Bakr would come and say, Ya Rasulullah, hawwin alayk. فإن الله منجزك ما وعدك. Ya Rasulullah, take it easy. قال يشفق أبو بكر على رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. Abu Bakr would feel bad for the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. He was in a state of because he has to worry. He is the leader and this has to work. And if it fails, then the whole thing fails. He didn't know. He never walked into a battle knowing it was going to be victorious. You'll know that from Uhud. If you don't know that now, you'll find that out in Uhud. He didn't know on the day of Badr. He wasn't sitting back like, no problem. It's all easy. I already know we're going to win this one. Sleep, enjoy. It's going to be, no. He had no reason to believe that, alayhi salatu wasalam. He was never told that. I'll stop with that, inshallah ta'ala, so that you can run the Kahoot, and we'll continue this story, inshallah ta'ala, next week. Subhanakallah, bihamdik, shanu la ilaha illa anta.